3.5 is about the intermediate value theorem, and then we're going to go over how to graph without a calculator, which we've been doing all this unit as well. So the intermediate value theorem is just saying there's two zeros that they give you, and they want you to show that in between those two zeros there's a real zero that crosses the x-axis. So in order to show that, all you're going to do is you're going to plug in both zeros one at a time, and if they have opposite sides, what that means, there's at least one value between those two where the graph does cross the x-axis. So it wants us to show that there's a real zero in between x equals 2 and x equals 3. So what we have to do is we have to do f of 2 equals, and now we're going to plug in 2 for x. So 2 cubed minus 2 times 2 minus 5. So 2 cubed would give me 8. Negative 2 times 2 would give me negative 4, and then minus 5. When I subtract all that, I'm going to get negative 1. So that's 1. Now I have to do f of 3. So f of 3 would be 3 cubed minus 2 times 3 minus 5. So 3 cubed is 27. Negative 2 times 3 is negative 6. And then minus 5. So I'm going to get 16. So what I want you to take a look at is your final answer. So f of 2 gave me negative 1, and f of 3 gave me 16. So since the signs are different, there's a real value or a real zero in between 2 and 3. So since signs are opposite, there is a real zero. So what I want you to do is I want you to repeat that process for the next two examples. And then we're going to go on to graphing without a calculator. So things that will help you graph without a calculator. One is using that leading coefficient test. So can you tell if the function's odd or even, and then if the leading coefficient is positive or negative, and what happens when it does that. Next, the multiplicity. So that was in 3.4. So if the multiplicity is an odd number, it crosses the x-axis. If it's even, it's a touch and turn. Then we also need to find our x-intercepts and our y-intercepts. So that's from chapter 2 and 3.1. So let's take a look at this first example. It says graph f of x, which equals x to the 4 minus 2x plus 1. So let's start with our leading coefficient test. So my leading degree is 4. Well, 4 is an even number. So I know it's even. Now my leading coefficient is 1. Which means it's positive. So if I'm thinking about end behavior, an even degree that's positive, I know it's going to go up towards the left, something happens in the middle, and then it goes up towards the right. So I have that down. Now the multiplicity. So what I need for multiplicity is I need my zeros. Well, in order to find zeros, I need to find my x-intercepts. So what we're going to do is we're going to take all this function and we're going to set it equal to 0. So x to the 4th minus 2x squared plus 1 equals 0. So because 2 is half of 4, remember we can split this up as x squared times x squared. And now two numbers that multiply to 1 but add up to negative 2 are negative 1 and negative 1. Well, if you notice, that's like me saying x squared minus 1 squared equals 0. So that helps because this has a multiplicity of 2. So when I set this equal to 0, I'm going to get x squared equals 1. Square root of 1 is plus or minus 1. So, so I know my x-intercepts are at negative 1, 0, and 1, 0. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to plot those points. So here's one point, here's another. Now I have to figure out what my y-intercept is. To figure out my y-intercept, remember you plug in 0 for x. So it's going to be 0 to the 4th minus 2 times 0 squared plus 1. When you add that together, my y-intercept is 0, 1. So I can plot that point. So those are my x and y intercepts. So I'm going to go back to this multiplicity of 2. So because it's 2, that's an even number. So since it's even, it's a touch and turn, which means that at both x equals 1 and x equals negative 1, it's going to be a touch and turn. So I know I have to start off with my arrow going up towards the left. So my multiplicity tells me I'm going to touch and turn at negative 1. I have to go through my y-intercept, and then I'm going to touch and turn again at 1. And that's my graph. So most important things to remember is your leading coefficient test. That's going to tell you where you start and end. Your touch and turn and your crosses, so that's your multiplicity. So you need to figure out your x-intercepts to do that. And then you also have to figure out your y-intercept. So what I want you to do now is I want you to try these two problems if you haven't done that already. And then you're going to continue on with the rest of the sheet.